She said it began on a night she wishes she could forget. A narrow hallway, a wooden door, and the sound of her own breath echoing louder than her footsteps. She pushed the door open slowly, and the room greeted her with a silence that felt staged, almost as if something was waiting for her to step inside. Candles were placed in a perfect circle. Shadows clung to the walls like they were listening, and around the center, the others stood, still, watching, whispering among themselves with a kind of precision she had never heard before. Then one whisper rose above the others. A single name, a Christian's name. And the moment it was spoken, every voice stopped. Every head turned. The air seemed to shift, like whatever they had called on had turned its gaze toward that name. She told us that was the first time she felt fear inside the very space she once trusted. Because the whispers weren't random. The circle wasn't random. The silence wasn't random. Something had been prepared long before she entered that room, and she realized she wasn't there to witness it. She was there to participate in it. Her palms began to sweat. Her heartbeat slowed in a way she couldn't explain. And deep inside her chest, something warned her, leave. But no one leaves once the circle begins. They began chanting, not loud but steady, like a door being unlocked one slow click at a time. She stood at the edge of the room, watching their faces change as they focused on that one Christian's name. A name she had never heard until that night. Yet suddenly it felt heavy, targeted, marked. And as the rhythm tightened, something shifted in the center of the circle. She said she didn't see anything with her eyes, but she felt a presence press against the room, subtle, cold, deliberate. The others welcomed it. She didn't, because whatever answered them carried an attention that felt foreign and hungry. Standing there, she suddenly understood. This wasn't a gathering. This wasn't a ritual. This was an opening. And she was about to witness a gate being drawn toward someone who had no idea their name was being spoken in a hidden room at midnight. She swallowed hard, took a step back, and that's when the oldest witch turned her head toward her, slowly, as if she had heard a thought, not a sound. Then she said something that froze her spine for years. "He prayed tonight. That changes everything. Today I will reveal what witches say behind closed doors before they target a Christian. Not theories, not rumors, real conversations. The exact words spoken in their circles, the exact moments in their rituals, the exact decisions that determine who they attack, when they attack, and why. Because in the unseen world, nothing is random. Every spiritual attack has a meeting, a record, a gate, and a permission. And the truth is this: before any battle erupts in your life, before an arrow flies at your mind, before a strange heaviness meets you at midnight, your name is discussed somewhere. In a place you cannot see, in a moment you did not hear, in a conversation not meant for your ears. Tonight, you will hear it. This is not to spark fear. This is to bring clarity, authority, and protection. Because darkness only thrives where ignorance lives. And once you understand how the enemy selects targets, you'll recognize the signs long before the attack arrives. Keep the tension tight. Move like a soldier entering enemy territory. Inside the underworld councils, witches don't cast randomly. They watch, they listen, they track the prayer patterns of believers like scouts preparing for war. In their gatherings, they ask 3 questions, every time. Whose hedge is weak? Whose fire has reduced? Whose midnight has gone silent? These questions decide everything. Because the kingdom of darkness is not chaotic, it is strategic. And in their confessions, yes, the ones delivered by ex-witches, warlocks, and occult escapees, a terrifying pattern appears. The moment a Christian's midnight prayer life weakens, their name rises in the kingdom of darkness, like smoke from a broken altar. That is when the witches begin to circle. Not loudly, not dramatically, not with a sudden storm, but quietly, deliberately, with whispers like cold fingers sliding through a room. Target assigned, gate identified, proceed at midnight. And tonight, I will walk you through the exact sequence, step by step, from the moment they spot a believer's weakness to the moment they open a spiritual gate against that person's home, destiny, or mind. This is not just information. This is warfare intelligence. This is the kind of revelation that turns victims into warriors and confuse Christians into spiritually armed soldiers. Stay with me. What you're about to hear is not commonly taught, because the enemy works hardest on the ground he thinks you'll never see. But tonight, Every hidden conversation is coming to light. Every strategy is being exposed. Every gate opened against you is about to be recognized, so you can shut it before it ever takes effect. Deep breath. The war is real. The weapons are spiritual, and the exposure begins now. Here is the part most people never hear, the part the ex-witch said she regretted ever participating in. Darkness thickens around the candle. Witches don't strike randomly. They don't just pick a Christian and attack. There is a system, a structure, a strategy. The flame bends sharply, as if pushed by an unseen force. In slow motion, shadowy silhouettes gather around a long table. In the Dark Kingdom, nothing is done without a meeting first, and every meeting begins with the same question. Who among them has left a gate open? Silence hangs heavy. They evaluate spiritual weaknesses, the way a general studies the cracks in an enemy fortress. Images flash, a shield slipping, armor with a chink in it, a warrior yawning at his post. They look for believers who are spiritually asleep, not physically asleep, spiritually unguarded, distracted, tired, offended, wounded, or slowly drifting. Thunder rolls, distant but rising. Then the discussions begin, the kind this ex-witch said kept her awake long after she escaped. The silhouettes lean forward, whispering among themselves. They ask questions like, whose prayer life dropped this week? Who abandoned their midnight watch? Who opened a door through anger? Who is holding unforgiveness? Who fed fear? Who allowed a secret sin to grow roots? These questions are not random. They are legal. The word legal echoes faintly in the darkness. In spiritual warfare, the kingdom of darkness cannot touch a believer without a legal gate. They need permission, even if the believer gives it unknowingly. The scene shifts into a vision of the spiritual realm. Massive armies facing each other. Angels like blinding fire. Dark forces like shifting smoke. Between them stand mysterious gates of light and gates of shadow. The ex-witch said every attack briefing took place before what they called the warfare. A spiritual map, a grid of gates showing every Christian under observation. Every open gate glowed red, every fortified gate glowed white. The map pulses like a living heartbeat. They never wasted energy on fortified believers, those covered by obedience, worship, purity, and prayer. They focused on the ones whose gates were dimming. Soft whispers rise, the sleepy ones, the wounded ones, the distracted ones. A lone Christian sits on their bed, scrolling their phone in the dark. And most of the time, the believer never knows they've been added to the list. The scene returns to the Dark Council. These conversations, these evaluations, are the reason some attacks feel sudden, heavy, overwhelming. But nothing about them is sudden. A slow zoom closes in on the whispers around the table. They follow spiritual laws, laws that neither kingdom can break. The candle's flame flickers violently, then goes out. Darkness. A breath. And this, the voice whispers, is where everything changed for the ex-witch. Because once she understood how these gates worked, she realized a terrifying truth. A long pause. Most Christians open the gates themselves. Silence. The voice grows steadier. Now we go deeper, inside one of those meetings. Not to glorify darkness, but to expose what they look for and how to shut those gates forever. The night felt heavier than usual. She thought it would be another ordinary gathering. Another night of empty rituals and borrowed darkness. But that night, something shifted. She remembers how the room fell silent the moment the leader entered, a woman the others called Mother of the Gate. Her presence carried a darkness that felt physical. Even the air seemed to obey her. It was the first time I heard them say the name of a Christian out loud, the ex-witch says, her voice trembling. The leader raised her hand, and the entire circle froze. A candle flickered violently as she stepped forward, holding a small black bowl where smoke curled upward unnaturally. Tonight, the leader whispered, we handle the one who prays at midnight. The ex-witch says her heart stopped. She didn't know Christians could become targets. She didn't know their names were ever spoken in places like this. The leader opened a burning piece of paper. Burning, yet refusing to turn to ash. Inside was a name. The room reacted instantly. Some hissed, some leaned forward with interest, one stood up slowly, as if volunteering. They never choose at random, the ex-witch confesses. They study, they observe, they wait. She explains the criteria they used, the spiritual weaknesses they watched for in a believer. They looked for a believer whose prayer life had cracks. Not someone who didn't pray at all. Those were already neutralized. They wanted the one who prayed inconsistently. The one whose shield was lifted one night and dropped the next. They looked for emotional wounds, fear, frustration, resentment. To them, she says, pain is an entrance. They watched for sudden spiritual rising. The believer God was elevating too fast. The one whose worship shook atmospheres. The one whose midnight prayer created pressure. Fire. But the biggest sign, she admits, is when a Christian's name appears in the spirit. Some Christians don't realize their names carry weight. But the enemy knows when someone becomes dangerous. A cold wind swept through the room when the leader spoke the Christian's name. It was like the air itself had chosen sides. The circle leaned in, hungry, not for the person, but for the light inside them. And then the leader said something that shook her to her core. Their prayers touch the gates. If we do not answer them, those gates will close on us. The ex-witch swallows hard as she recounts it. That was when I understood. Prayer wasn't noise, it was pressure, it was warfare. As they began to plan, she sat frozen. They discussed the believer, studied them, assigned roles, opened gates she didn't understand yet, and she sat there asking herself a question that would haunt her for months. Why is one Christian worth this much effort? She looked down at her hands and saw them shaking. For the first time in years, she felt fear. But buried inside that fear was something she hadn't felt in even longer. Conviction. A small flicker of unseen light stirred inside her chest, the light she thought she had killed long ago. But darkness recognized it before she did. I didn't know it, she whispers, but that night was the beginning of my escape. The narrator's voice returns, steady and somber. This was only the first gate she witnessed being opened. Only the first assignment she saw formed. And only the first moment she realized Christians rarely understand the kind of war they're actually in. A beat of silence. A single candle flickers out. But what happened next would change her life forever. She leans forward, her eyes fixed on the camera, and her voice drops into a whisper that feels heavier than the room itself. We never attack randomly. Every target is chosen with precision. We study you the same way a hunter studies footprints in the sand. A quiet pause. In witchcraft, the first attack is never physical, it's diagnostic. We scan your spiritual life the way a doctor scans an X-ray. The scene cuts to a dim room with a single candle burning. Books open, strange symbols etched on the floor, a faint whisper floating through the air. We look for weaknesses, not in your body, but in your spirit. She continues. Some people walk around with open gates and have no idea. If you don't pray, your gate is unguarded. If you don't worship, your atmosphere is unprotected. We can sense when someone's spiritual fire is going out. It's like smelling smoke from a dying flame. Her voice deepens. Emotional pain is a doorway. Trauma, heartbreak, loneliness, these create fractures in the soul. Images flicker. A woman crying in the dark, a man pacing alone, a child hugging themselves tightly. These fractures become entry points, not because you're evil, but because pain makes the heart vulnerable. She exhales slowly, and then there's anger, bitterness, rage. There is nothing darker than a heart filled with anger. Anger lowers discernment. An angry person can't hear God clearly. A storm cloud swirls around a silhouette, the spiritual metaphor becoming visual. And fear. Fear is not just an emotion, it's a frequency. In the spirit realm, fear is as loud as a siren. When you fear us, it empowers us. She shakes her head gently. But the one that exposes people the most is inconsistency. Your prayer life has a rhythm, and when that rhythm breaks, we notice. If you pray Monday, skip Tuesday, fall on Wednesday, your gate rhythm becomes unstable. We attack when your consistency breaks. Never when you're strong, always when you're drifting. She looks straight into the lens. We hated pure people. A pure heart radiates light. That light blinds witches. Purity frustrates dark operations. That's why the enemy tries to stain your heart with offense, lust, jealousy. If he can contaminate your heart, he can dim your light. Then she reveals the part most people never imagine. Our conversations were never random. If we asked about your fears, your heartbreak, your frustrations, it wasn't to comfort you, it was to read you. Every emotion reveals a spiritual gate. The more you talk, the more we see. The more you open emotionally, the more you open spiritually. Her expression turns sober. The kingdom of darkness studies human behavior the way a soldier studies enemy patterns. Nothing is random, nothing is accidental. A dark map fades into view, glowing points representing souls, some bright, some flickering, some dim. Every soul emits a signal, that's what we read. She explains the unsaid truth. We avoided those whose fire was strong. We attacked those whose fire was fading. A glowing warrior stands alone in a field of shadows, armor shining, unmovable. The enemy attacks the unarmed, not the undefeated. She begins to reveal deeper spiritual laws, spoken like someone who knows the secrets but no longer belongs to them. You attract what you host. Fear attracts darkness. Faith attracts light. A wounded heart leaks spiritual energy, and that energy makes you visible to dark forces. Those who walk under spiritual authority are harder to access. Those who isolate themselves are easier to strike. The tone shifts again, heavier, almost trembling. When witches choose a target, they're not really choosing the person. They're choosing the weakest gate around that person. Every attack begins with a gate, and every gate begins with the heart. She closes her eyes for a moment, like someone remembering a battlefield. Then she opens them and says, "And that is how they choose who to attack." She takes a slow breath and finally says the part she's avoided for years. There was always a meeting before an attack. She describes it like a dark war council, quiet, cold, strategic, not chaos, but calculation. She remembers being led into a dim room, a twisted mirror of a prayer meeting. No worship, no unity, just commands and analysis. The leading witch sat at the center, scanning the room with eyes that felt like they could dissect a person's spirit. Then she whispered, "Who is resisting us?" Every witch in the room began confessing what they had sensed during the night. She remembers one meeting clearly. The young witch stood and said, "The woman we targeted, she woke up again at midnight." The leader frowned. Did she speak? Yes, she prayed. It wasn't long, but it shook the atmosphere. A quiet rustle moved through the room. Then she has sensed us. Another witch added, "But her prayer was weak tonight." She hesitated. There is fear in her spirit. The leader leaned forward. Fear is the crack. Fear opens the gate. If she prays with confidence, we lose. If she prays with fear, we win. Even then, even lost in darkness, the ex-witch felt something inside her twist. They weren't just observing Christians, they were studying them like hunters study patterns. The leading witch listed the signs they looked for. If the Christian hesitated before praying, doubt. If they became sleepy at 11:55 p.m., manipulation successful. If they suddenly remembered their problems, distraction effective. If they checked their phone before prayer, focus broken. If they prayed without scripture, no sword in hand. If they prayed softly, authority weakening. If their mind wandered, resistance collapsing. We attack the moment their spirit becomes quiet but not surrendered, not to God, but to fear. The ex-witch watched as the room nodded in agreement, like soldiers receiving battlefield intelligence. When did she stop praying with fire? After 3 nights, she grew tired. A slow smile spread across the leader's face. Then strike on the 4th night. Someone asked why. Because most Christians do not understand persistence. They pray once, twice, 3 times, and expect the mountain to move. But we wait for the sigh. The moment they think nothing is happening, that is when we enter. Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. The ex-witch says her heart pounded, then and even now. She saw spiritual warfare unfolding with military precision, but from the wrong side. She turns her face and confesses, "We never attacked randomly. We attacked when their guard was lowest, when their prayer life became a ritual, when their midnight became inconsistent, when their authority became a whisper." Timing was everything. They watched for the exact moment a believer's spirit grew tired. Christians don't lose battles because they lack power. They lose because they lose timing. Power they already have. Authority they already carry. But timing, that's where the war is often lost. She pauses. They waited for the midnight prayer to become a habit without heart. That's when they open the gate. She shifts in her seat, eyes lowering as though remembering a long-buried truth. "You need to understand why the meetings always happened at night." She says it slowly, as if choosing every word carefully. Night is not just a time of day, it is a spiritual environment. She explains that darkness itself is not evil. But darkness carries silence, and silence carries sensitivity. Human activity drops, human noise fades, human distraction weakens, and in that quiet, unseen things move with fewer obstacles. The night hours are when the spirit world becomes loud. She says witches prefer those hours for one reason: because humans are drifting. Your body is tired, your mind is soft, your guard is relaxed. She pauses. Spiritual conversations are easier when the person you're watching is half asleep. She explains that between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., there is a kind of spiritual thinness, a reduced resistance in the human atmosphere. Not because night is cursed, but because humans are vulnerable. People think midnight is just a time, but midnight is a doorway. She explains that thoughts hit harder at night. Fear feels louder. Temptation feels sharper. Sadness sinks deeper. Loneliness becomes heavy. Dreams become strange because the atmosphere changes. She describes it like this. During the day, your soul has armor. Routine, tasks, noise, people, light, all these things guard your mind without you realizing it. But at night, those layers fall off. Your spirit is more exposed. Your emotions are more open. Your mind is quieter. Your attention is uncluttered. This is why many spiritual attacks are planned during the night hours. Not because witches are powerful, but because people are weak. She explains that conversations in the Dark Kingdom often happen around midnight, because humans are less vigilant. Prayer rooms go cold. Intercessors sleep early. Families stop watching spiritual patterns. Fear becomes louder. Dreams become accessible. Minds settle. She then reveals something few people know. A witch does not need your body to be awake. They need your spirit to be quiet. And night provides that silence. She says this is also why many people wake up suddenly between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. Not randomly, not because of bad sleep, but because their spirit feels movement. Some people dismiss it, some scroll their phones, some go back to sleep, but others get up, others pray, and those prayers disrupt entire meetings. She leans closer, almost whispering. The night feels different because the battle is different. The Dark Kingdom prefers night because it mirrors their nature. Hidden, quiet, strategic. Not bold, not open, always in secrecy. She says, they don't meet at noon. They meet when humanity sleeps, because if people are asleep, their spirit is easier to reach. She pauses again. This is why people feel heaviness at night. This is why temptations rise at night. This is why depression deepens at night. This is why nightmares come at night. It's not random. Night has laws. She speaks with a mixture of regret and revelation. When I was inside, we waited for the night because we knew most Christians stopped watching. We knew their prayer life dropped. We knew their mind wandered. We knew their spirit wasn't alert. Then she says the line that explains everything. Night is when the gatekeepers sleep. A long silence follows. Her face softens. But the ones who stay awake, the ones who pray, we feared them. She closes her eyes for a moment as if remembering those nights. The failed assignments, the disrupted plans, the unexpected waves of light that broke into their meetings. We met at night because night was quiet, but heaven was never quiet back. She says there were always 7 themes in their conversations. 7 things they studied about a person before deciding how to attack. 7 silent observations they made from night to night. She begins with the first one. We always asked if the Christian was spiritually alert or asleep. She explains that alert does not mean physically awake. It means sensitive, watchful, aware. Some people can be awake in their body but asleep in their spirit. Others can be asleep physically but alert spiritually. A safe example she gives. They would watch if the person instantly sensed heaviness, anxiety, or strange pressure at night. Alert people notice shifts. Sleeping spirits ignore them. She connects it to real life. People who are spiritually alert get sudden urges to pray. They feel warnings. They sense danger early. People who are spiritually asleep brush everything off as just stress. The room would always go quiet when this theme was discussed, because it was the first sign of whether the assignment would fail or succeed. She moves to the next one. We studied what emotional weakness could be exploited. Not created, just exploited. She clarifies that spiritual enemies don't invent the wound. They press the wound that already exists. She gives a safe example. A person who feels unappreciated may suddenly experience intensified loneliness at night. Not new loneliness, just amplified. Real-life connection. People often wonder why certain emotions spike randomly. Sadness, anger, jealousy, fear. She says these spikes usually happen where a wound already exists. Darkness presses what is already weak. Then she explains the third theme. We examined who the person was connected to spiritually. Because relationships strengthen or weaken a believer, some connections create spiritual covering. Others create spiritual vulnerability. They would check. Does the person have praying friends, a strong church community, a mentor, or are they isolated? A safe example. A believer who suddenly distances themselves from spiritual companions becomes easier to reach. Real-life connection. People often underestimate how much spiritual strength is shared through relationships. When a person cuts themselves off, their atmosphere becomes quieter and easier to influence. The fourth theme always made the room lean forward. We discussed what the person fears. She clarifies they did not need rituals or spells. They only needed to know the fear. Because fear opens more doors than anything else. A safe example. Someone afraid of failure might face sudden waves of discouragement. Not because failure is coming, but because fear is being stirred. Real-life connection. People often notice that when they fear something, life seems to push that fear toward them. She says it's not coincidence. Fear attracts attack the way light attracts insects. Then the fifth theme came. We checked whether the person prayed consistently. She explains that power does not come from long prayers, but from consistent ones. Even short prayers, done regularly, create a shield. A safe example. Someone who prays once every 3 days is spiritually predictable. Their guard rises and falls like a wave. Real-life connection. People who only pray when they feel trouble often live with unnecessary battles. Those who pray daily, even briefly, become difficult to access. The sixth theme was quieter, more subtle. We looked for discouragement. Discouragement lowers spiritual defenses more effectively than many attacks. A discouraged person withdraws, isolates, delays prayer, stops believing, stops watching. A safe example. A believer who once prayed boldly, but now mutters through their prayers out of exhaustion. Real-life connection. Discouragement rarely appears loudly. It creeps in through disappointment, delay, unanswered questions, emotional fatigue. When a person is discouraged, their spiritual atmosphere becomes dim. Then she reveals the seventh. The one everyone in that room paid attention to. We checked whether there was an open spiritual gate. She clarifies again, no rituals here, just simple openings. A moment of anger not surrendered, a long season of fear, a relationship that drains the spirit, a thought pattern left unchecked, a wound revisited too often. A safe example, someone going through emotional pain but refusing to talk to God about it. That silence becomes a gate. Real-life connection. Any area of life that is left unprotected becomes a doorway. Not because the person is wicked, but because they are hurting. She sits back, hands folded. These 7 conversations happened every time, before every attack, before every attempt, before every assignment. She looks down for a moment. We studied people more than we cast anything. We looked for the open places in their lives, because the human heart tells the truth about where the battle will begin. She breathes out slowly, as if relieved to finally say it. If these areas were strong, we failed. If they were weak, we tried. If they were guarded, we fled. She closes her eyes. Darkness studies people, but it fears the ones who study themselves. She sits forward, hands clasped, and says gently, if you're going to understand spiritual warfare, you must learn the signs, not to live in fear, but to live awake. She begins with the first sign, sudden emotional heaviness. She explains that this is not the normal weight of a bad day. This heaviness arrives quickly, without a trigger. It settles on the chest. It lingers even when nothing is wrong. A safe example. Someone wakes up and feels overwhelmed out of nowhere, even though nothing happened. Real-life connection. This kind of heaviness usually appears when your spirit is being pressed, not your mind. It's a sign to pray, not panic. She goes on. Unexplainable discouragement. Not sadness. Not depression. Discouragement that comes silently and suddenly. A safe example. A person who was excited about life yesterday suddenly feels drained today with no reason. Real-life connection. Discouragement is often a spiritual fog. It makes strong people feel tired and confident people feel unworthy. When it comes from nowhere, it often means you're being spiritually quieted. She continues. Consistent spiritual laziness. Not physical laziness, spiritual. She explains, there are days you don't feel like praying. That's normal. But when it becomes a pattern, when every time you try to pray you feel exhausted or uninterested, that's not just routine fatigue. A safe example: every night you plan to pray, but you somehow never do. Real-life connection. Spiritual laziness is often a sign of spiritual pressure. When prayer becomes unusually difficult, it means something is resisting your strength. She shifts slightly, eyes softening. Pressure and dreams. She explains that dreams are not always messages, but they are always spiritual environments. Pressure dreams feel tight, stressful, or heavy. Not necessarily nightmares, sometimes just confusing, chaotic, or draining. A safe example: a person wakes up more tired than they were before sleeping. Real-life connection. Dream pressure doesn't mean an attack succeeded. It means your spirit was active, not passive. It's a sign to pray when you wake up. She breathes in slowly, feeling watched or spiritually monitored. She clarifies carefully. Not paranoia, not fear, but a subtle sense of being observed spiritually, not physically. A nudge in the atmosphere, not the imagination. A safe example: someone is alone at night and suddenly feels a shift in the room. Not a noise, just awareness. Real-life connection. Many people feel this but dismiss it. It's often the spirit sensing activity long before the mind understands it. Awareness is a form of protection. She continues. Sudden distractions during prayer. This is one of the most common signs. Not simple distraction, targeted distraction. A safe example: a person begins praying and instantly remembers 10 tasks, 5 problems, and 3 conversations they forgot about all day. Real-life connection. The timing of distraction reveals its source. If distraction only comes when you pray, it's not random. It means your prayer is touching something important. Then she reaches the 7th sign, the one people often ignore: strange, repeated patterns. She explains that patterns are rarely coincidences. When the same kind of problem keeps returning, the same disappointment, the same dream, the same fear, the same conflict, it usually means something spiritual is cycling. A safe example: a person always becomes discouraged at the same time of month or before the same type of breakthrough. Real-life connection. Patterns reveal unseen battles. When something repeats, it means it hasn't been addressed spiritually. It's a sign, not a curse. She closes her eyes briefly before finishing. These signs are not to frighten you. They are to make you aware, because awareness is protection. She exhales. You are never targeted because you are weak. You are targeted because you carry something. And the moment you understand the signs, you stop being the hunted. She opens her eyes again, steady, clear. The danger is not in being attacked. The danger is in not noticing. The truth is simple. No spiritual attack is stronger than a believer who understands their authority and knows how to guard their gates. So here are the steps. Not emotional hype, not superstition, not fear-based ideas, but biblical, practical, battle-tested strategies that close every door and silence every midnight intrusion. 1. Strengthen your prayer life. A weak prayer life leaves gates unguarded. Discipline restores the wall. Set fixed prayer times, morning and midnight. Pray scripture, not emotion. Keep a prayer journal to track patterns, dreams, and attacks. Build consistency, not intensity. God answers order, not chaos. When prayer becomes structure, the enemy loses timing advantage. 2. Close spiritual gates. Through forgiveness. Unforgiveness is one of the strongest spiritual entry points. It keeps old wounds open, and open wounds attract whispers. Bring each person before God by name. Release them from your judgment. Renounce bitterness, resentment, and revenge. Ask God to restore every place where pain opened a gate. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is spiritual warfare in its purest form. 3. Build spiritual alertness. Attacks work best in darkness, not physical darkness, but awareness darkness. Pay attention to dreams, recurring emotions, sudden fear, or unusual heaviness. Test every feeling. Where did this come from? Identify patterns that repeat around midnight. Keep your spirit awake even when you sleep. A believer who is spiritually alert becomes impossible to ambush. 4. Create a disciplined night routine. Midnight battles are won before midnight. Shut down noise. Social media, distractions, unnecessary conversations. Clean your atmosphere. Play worship, read a psalm, pray in the Spirit. Guard your final thoughts. What you meditate on becomes the gate you sleep under. Go to bed in peace, not turmoil. The night responds to the condition of your spirit at the moment you close your eyes. 5. Strengthen your worship life. Worship breaks atmospheres faster than shouting. It fills rooms where fear once lived. It invites God into spaces the enemy hoped to occupy. Choose 2 to 3 worship songs that lift your spirit. Play them consistently during night prayers. Let worship reset your emotional climate. Use worship to shift from fear, alignment, confidence. Worship is not music, it is a weapon. 6. Speak scripture with authority. Darkness respects scripture spoken with conviction. Speak promises, not complaints. Declare identity, not insecurity. Use verses that directly address authority, protection, and peace. Don't whisper, speak with clarity. Scripture is not a quote, it is a command. 7. Cut off emotional openings. Many gates open inside the heart, not around the house. Shut down emotional ties that drain you. End relationships that feed fear, lust, manipulation, or confusion. Guard your hope. Hopelessness is a spiritual opening. Heal emotional wounds so the enemy cannot use them as invisible doorways. What you allow emotionally becomes what the enemy can touch spiritually. She leans back, eyes softening, voice steady. Remember this: God protects his children. Not sometimes, not when it's convenient. Always. No conversation of darkness can stand against a praying believer. She pauses, letting the words settle. A believer who prays is not fighting alone. Every word, every moment of faith draws unseen strength. Faith is greater than fear, she continues. Fear whispers. Faith commands. Faith aligns the spirit with God's power. Fear fades in the presence of obedience. Light exposes darkness, she says, almost smiling. Darkness cannot hide where light shines. Where truth, worship, and scripture dwell, deception falls apart. Her voice grows firmer. Victory is the natural identity of a Christian. Not earned, not hoped for. It is yours by inheritance. Every attack, every strategy, every midnight plot cannot change that. She looks directly forward. You are stronger than the forces that watch you. You are seen, you are protected, you are victorious. And your victory is not temporary, it is your birthright. A long pause. The weight of darkness lifts, the room feels lighter. And finally, there is only peace. Walk awake, pray boldly, stand firm, light always wins. Darkness may whisper, but it is the voice of heaven that seals your victory.